Welcome to Leading Notes, where I talk with musicians who are leading the revitalisation of social health in our communities. I'm your host, Melissa Forbes. Joanna Brooke is a choral conductor and soprano based in Melbourne with over 10 years of experience leading choirs. She's currently the musical director of the Monash University Choral Society and has served as artistic director of the Jubilate Singers and works with Gondwana choirs. With training in social work, Joanna's unique practice sits at the intersection of music and trauma-informed care. She leads research into trauma-informed creative arts interventions and runs sessions at arts health conferences and events on this work. In 2025, she's commencing a PhD at the University of Melbourne, exploring singing as collective care, perfectly aligned with our show's mission of music that creates meaningful social connections. Joanna Brooke, welcome to Leading Notes.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Joanna, you're someone who's obviously fascinated by singing, yet as we know in Western contexts, we have this sense of elitism when it comes to singing, and that makes some people feel quite unworthy to share their voice. How do you confront that in your work?
Yeah, this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I think for me personally, I grew up in a household where everybody sung. I grew up in a culture of classical musicians. Both my parents are trained professional musicians. So there was sort of a glitch in the matrix for me, if you might say that, because I didn't have this sense of elitism. I had this sense of we all sing, and had a mother who was a passionate music educator who taught singing and instruments and recorder to everybody for free in our local community, and was passionate about making beautiful sounds with the recorder and with our voices. So the notion of elitism and enculturation that I think happens a lot in colonial Western contexts, I didn't grow up with, but I'm very familiar with it. And as I've made my way through as a singer and a musician through, the worlds that we are in as musicians, but also more broadly in the West, I have really been confronted with this idea that music and singing is attached to skill, is attached to ability, whereas all of us have a birthright to sing, a connection to use our voices. We all are brought into the world, and one of the first things that we hear is the cooing of a mother or of the carer that's holding us. The first things we do are we take a big breath and release a big, loud sound. And I really believe that we should continue to do this. So in my work as a choral conductor, as a singing teacher, and now as a researcher, I'm looking to create spaces where people can shed those layers that have been taught to us and come back to that organic place of freely expressing with our voices that we all can do, should be doing, and should and joyfully be able to do regularly.
There's a lot of shame, isn't there, attached to this for some people, where it's been, as you say, kind of enculturated into them that they don't have the right to participate for whatever reason. How do you deal with people in your groups when they present like that, where you know that this is a big thing for them to be doing, to be facing this, but there's clearly a desire within them to move beyond that? How do you deal with that?
I do see this as restorative work, and I have a social work background and a keen interest in people and relational dynamics. Now, I wouldn't tell people directly when I lead sessions that this is a trauma-informed place and space, but I do set up the space with trauma-informed principles. And this is important because I actually do frame and see this as trauma work. I believe that we are disconnected from our inherent right and worthiness to sing. And everybody has, and I'm sure we all know this, a story at some point in their childhood or their early life of someone saying, oh, sing loud, sing less loud, or that sounds terrible, or, oh, you should probably be in the altos at best, And so there are these patterns and these stories that we carry with us in our bodies that we're maybe not even aware of. And so setting up spaces for me is really important in giving people a sense of being able to trust, to know straight away that they won't be asked to sing on their own, to have a sense of choice. So never making anybody sing, having an option to listen. And listen is also musical participation. Listening to music is also a part of being engaged and being connected to the sounds around you. And I guess the other part of it is, wherever possible, is I'm trying to invoke in people a sense of play, a sense of actually letting go. We're not producing anything. We're actually just free-form playing together. And what is that feeling like? If we can find that place within ourselves, we're much less likely to be controlled by fear, by shame, and much more likely to be able to sort of let go and lean into the moment and be much less aware of ourselves and much more aware of the connection that we have innately to others, to the sounds, to the space.
Yeah. That notion of play sounds like it's a really important thread through your work. Talk to me about the way that you use improvisation.
It's a funny word, improvisation, that I struggle with a lot, I think, because so much of it we have an attachment or a projection to, I know myself, I do, to skill and ability. When I think of improvisation, I think of jazz, I think of great virtuosos, even going back to Renaissance music and classical music, very precise set of notes we can and can't play. But I am reclaiming improvisation in the work that I do with groups. And what this looks like is it's experimental or free form singing, but using musical motives and compositions that I create. So I like to say that I gift some musical ideas or motives, and it will be some lines, some words, some lyrics, options to harmonize, options to echo each other, and then from there, there's a sense of a structure. So we have boundaries. It's really important in work with relational work with people to have what Beyond calls sort of like the container, that we know the structure of the house or the playroom or the toys we're using, and then from within there we can play them. We need a co-created world that we understand what it looks like. From there we can flow. So they're the musical compositional elements that I will bring to a group. And then I will also be in there with them singing and demonstrating. And then it's an encouragement of being present in the moment. And so different to when one might improvise with an instrument in a different setting, this is around what can I hear and how do I want to respond to it? What is my body feeling? What sound does it want to make? Does it just want to deeply breathe and be on a low hum that feels just really connected to the ground within me, below me? Does it want to listen to sounds that sound beautiful and in accepting the gift of that sound, actually affirm it and sing it back to the person that sung it to me? So in this way, there's a sense of coming out of our heads and actually really being present to a listening and to a singing. And a really critical part of that is that me, as the musical leader, I'm not outside of that. I'm in there as well, being playful, being connected to everybody. And that's also a trauma-informed principle, this idea of power sharing. I'm not interested in creating music with people where I'm some expert that's outside of and has all the answers. I'm really interested in this deep connection with one another. And I, as a musical conductor or a singer, I impact spaces and I'm impacted by them just as much as everybody in the group. And that is an absolute honour for me as someone who gets to curate these spaces.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a bit of a journey yourself in terms of reclaiming the right to improvise, perhaps with that kind of classical background. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely, that's accurate. Yeah, I've definitely grown up in the classical tradition and sung in choirs all of my life, and I'm very good at following and singing exactly what's on the page and not veering away from that at all.
So in that sense, then you really are one of us when it comes to being in the group, right? You've had that same journey. So when people in your group might perhaps think or be quite confronted by having to improvise and make things up, you can share with them that you've had that same experience.
Absolutely. And this is really key to work with communities or with any groups that have experienced any sort of disadvantage or dispossession or oppression. Whoever wants to enter into that space, it cannot be subjectless. You cannot be someone who is not bringing your own story and your own experiences. And that's not just in music, that's very much in, in social work, in trauma-informed care, we call that, reflective practice, this idea that the practitioner is very much impacted and impacting. There's an important vulnerability that I do bring to this type of work. Just as you said, I'm not outside of experiences of being harmed by our holding on to productivity in music and to ability. And I've often found that when I can be authentically myself and bring however I'm feeling, whether that's, a sense of nervousness or not sure how a group might go, that authenticity is really important because it gives other people permission to come as they are. And we can't sing and we can't breathe deeply unless we are really connected to how we're feeling in any given moment. And that's something that's also important to say, that there's no pretense of being joyful in the work that I do. Sometimes you need to get angry. You need to make sounds that really let out that anger or that sadness or the grief that you might be feeling. In fact, right now with everything that's going on in the world, a sense of feeling connected to each other and connected to what we're deeply feeling, considering the violence we're continuing to watch live stream on our phone every day. It's so important to just be fully ourselves and to be fully seen. So that is just something I try to model as a leader. It's not easy, but I believe it's an important ingredient to creating spaces that are built around self-determined safety for people to make music together.
Yeah. And it's really important, I think, this notion of vulnerability or, showing parts of your own journey that may not have been ideal is an important part. It's an important aspect of certain styles of leadership, being vulnerable. But then you have to couple that with a sense of security for the people that you're working with. Because if you're just there being vulnerable, I don't think that that's helpful necessarily. It does kind of help them to see that you have had similar experiences. But at the end of the day, you still have to create the environment where they feel safe and secure to experiment, right? So it's a bit of a balancing act is what I'm getting at.
It's absolutely a balancing act. And in a role like mine, when I'm creating these spaces, I actually have a curatorial role. There's this sense of I'm actually creating conditions for people to operate within. Myself as an authentic person, I'm one of those ingredients. But I'm also dancing between this sort of person that's in the room with them. I'm also, an elder of the room, or a person who has the big picture. There's this idea that Tavale from Mahana Culture, who's a fantastic cultural responsiveness consultant here in NAM, talks about the eagle and the ant, this idea of being both into the detail and in it with everybody, but also I have that big picture view. And of course, that's something that we musically do when we are conducting. We have that big picture view and we have an eye on the detail. But the collaboration and the connection with others is something that's a barrier that I still believe is there. When I do my conventional classical conducting with groups, that's a different type of role.
What do you mean there? Can you unpack that a little bit further? Because I find that really interesting.
I guess I'm interested in the binaries that we operate within in musical worlds. But also because I'm an arts health researcher, I see them so connected as well to social worker and client, doctor and patient, conductor and choir. I do pull all of those in the same sentence. I'm interested in creating spaces that are dialogical, and I take a framework from Martin Buber's I Thou, which is this idea that connection is fundamental and separateness comes after that. And for me, I think music has the ability to remind us of our fundamental connection, and for us to create creative spaces in music together where it's this experience of the in-between, where the sounds that we create, the musical output, is a product of more than just me or you, but it cannot be done without either of us or by just any one of us. It's that magic, that deep interhuman, interpersonal, subjectless space that I really do think is the antidote to so much of the compartmentalizing and individualizing that we are experiencing every day, whatever industry we're in.
Sorry, I'm laughing because everything that you're saying just resonates so much with what I've written about on these topics. Because, yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree that the type of work that you do, it is the antidote to the reductionist thinking that we find ourselves in. And, you alluded to, the state of the world. That's the end result of compartmentalization, of, breaking things into its component parts and failing to see how everything interacts as a whole. And, I guess that's quite philosophical, but I think it's really important to understand that that's the depth of the work. It's not just getting people in a room together and making some music, which is a great thing in and of itself. It's achieving some really profound outcomes, I think, when it's done in such a way that you're describing, which is like very thoughtful, highly reflective and reflexive, drawing on really important and vital frameworks to kind of inform your approach. It's really very exciting to hear you talk about that in such a way.
Thanks. Listen, it's very easy for it to be undermined and undervalued as well.
Yes.
When we're talking about any sort of artistic or relational practice that is deeply grounded in, or just that relationship and listening and deep listening and tuning into each other, it can very quickly feel quite, I don't want to use various words, new age or anything like that, but it's important to woo-woo. But actually in the Western colonial project, we need to really look at ourselves and sort of the practices that we're using it and think about the fact that once upon a time, we did improvise. Once upon a time, we sang together in families, in rooms, ad hoc, impromptu. We have taken all of that away from ourselves and sort of put music and singing into these spaces that you have to have skill or ability or no ears listening to you, like in the shower, to feel comfortable to do. But other cultures around the world are continuing these practices. They have the expertise and the knowledge. First Nations people continue to have this leadership and this knowledge, patiently waiting for us for the penny to drop to come back into ourselves.
We're a bit slow on the uptake, aren't we?
It's not new. It's not new age or woo-woo, and it's not simple. These are sophisticated ancient practices that are, I believe, a key and an antidote to the searching and the dislocation that so many of us, whether we are, once upon a time were practicing classical musicians or we're people who have never had the opportunity to sing or to play an instrument. I believe that this is a great connector and something that actually is based upon equity. Anybody can sing, use their body, join in with others, participate in this type of practice.
Yeah. I mean, our memories are so fickle, aren't they? I was thinking about the fact that, technology's had a huge impact on the way that we interact with music. And even 100 years ago, which in the grand scheme of things is like the blink of an eye, families, at least in, kind of Western European societies, would be gathered around the piano and singing for their entertainment, and then I guess the kind of slippery slope started when we had pianolas where people could put rolls in and then they kind of didn't have to play piano anymore. And then it just, it kind of took off from there to the point where now, most people's interaction with music is through listening, which has its own advantages, sure, but not necessarily through kind of interactive music making with other people. It's mediated very much by technology. And this is a very new thing. This is, dare I say it, not normal for human beings to have such a limited relationship with music.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because if I think about things like karaoke or singing loudly in the car, what are the places that the few localities where people do feel comfortable to sing, they are, highly mediated, or there are, our inhibitions need to be in some way dampened. And that is a really interesting entry point for me as a sort of a trauma-informed social worker. How can I recreate those places of helping people to get out of their heads, essentially? You know?
But getting out of your head means getting into your body, right?
That's almost even scarier, isn't it?
I think for most people that is the scary part, particularly, if we just limit it to singing. That's why singing, I think, is such a powerful kind of entry into bodily sensation, because you're using the body to create the music. So it's a profoundly personal thing. It's obviously literally an embodied thing. And so when people have an experience, say, where they're in a group and they somehow express something, or they can feel the group come together in a musical moment, they may have that kind of really profound moment where they might burst into tears, for example. There's that sense of release, or that sense of connecting to something that perhaps they didn't even know they had. So, getting out of your head, means getting into your body, which is a scary thing, but the rewards can be quite amazing if you are supported in that process by someone, with the skills to kind of lead that in a safe way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm interested in those ideas of sort of what's it like to feel perceived or judged versus what's it like to feel present and witnessed. I think that there are really important slight reframes. That idea of feeling on the spot, or feeling like something that's happening right now is not right, to I'm overcome with emotion, but I feel I can express it and it won't mean anything for how others are relating to me or to what's happening in the space. I was also thinking about when you were saying, the scariness of being in your body. It reminds me of conducting children's choirs, and the foray I had for a moment into running a children's entertainment group. Shout out to Avocado Smash.
That's great.
But I just think about like the role that humour and silliness plays in just reminding ourselves to let loose and not even think about the fact that we're in our bodies. Whenever I run kids choirs, we're doing singing games and all sorts of things where we're not even thinking about the fact that we're actually doing body percussion and canon and, but it's because it's for the game. And I am interested in that other element of we're here to create something together that is bigger than ourselves. And there's a safety in that. I think that could be quite important for adults who have a fear around really being connected to our body, that there's something bigger than myself here at play.
You've spoken about shifting from in your practice from production to expression and from skill building to responding. Can you talk to me about what you mean there?
Yeah, so I think especially around production, all of my years of conducting choirs and before that of singing in choirs, there's absolutely this aim or this goal of creating an output for an audience. So we've always got the sense of this gaze, the audience, the objective product in mind. It's actually what's guiding us in a way. And then the other wonderful things that happen in choirs are incidental to that, the connection and the joy and my shoulders and breath feel better after a night of singing. But the goal is, largely this producing of an outcome. I really am interested in turning that on its head. And what if it is just about me getting into a room and getting to just have a sense of this feels really good, or this is, again, just really coming back into the body, and the present moment right now is all that matters. Now, the facilitator in me, the person that's actually composed the works that we are exploring that are allowing us to play, I know that I've put enough intricate sort of factors and conditions in aesthetically that what everybody ends up singing will sound nice. There will be enough of a beautiful aesthetic pleasing sound in the room, But it's not the point. It is, though, from a trauma-informed perspective, really important that what people hear sounds good, that they feel that they've created something that's beautiful. Otherwise, we can be compounding the experiences people have had of feeling like they don't have a good voice. So I don't know if I've explained that very well, but there is this important element of the product is not the goal, expression is the goal, but there is an important sense of what you hear around you does actually sound aesthetically pleasing. That will uplift the experience.
Yeah, it reminds me of, are you familiar with Alexander technique?
Yes.
Yeah, the whole concept of end gaining, you know, that's the start of a lot of musicians' problems, is like thinking or I'm looking at where I need to get to and being focused on that, which takes your attention away from the present moment and all of the many behaviours, thoughts and feelings that go into getting to that place. So, the present moment focus of your work really resonates on that level. And I think also getting back to what we were talking about in terms of being in touch with the body, most of us aren't walking around every day thinking, how am I actually feeling physically? That we are so disconnected all the time from this physical shell that we have. And so, you're making, for me anyway, the connection between all of those things and trauma-informed practice really clear. I'm not, hugely familiar with trauma-informed practice, but I love the way that you're describing it in this particular context. It's making a lot of sense to me.
I'm glad to hear that. And it is, just one lens of many that you can, and we all are applying to understand more of how can we as musicians share the gifts of these spaces with, the various parts of the health sector that are calling out for more interventions that can provide mending and healing and support people with regulation and with connection. Yeah, and I hesitate to use phrases like trauma-informed or language from my social work background because I would never want to pathologize these spaces. This is art making. This is organic, free expression coming back to what we have done since we were kids until someone said shh. So I'm always sort of playing with being too technical or borrowing language that would make it sound like therapy. This is not therapy. This is art. It has therapeutic outcomes. And that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have to be very careful with the terminology that we use, and we have to balance that with not underplaying or underselling what art making is when it's done this way. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think if it's only considered in that sense, I feel like it doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't tell the personal stories of what people can achieve when these types of spaces are created for artistic expression. So I'm always looking for ways to try to better describe what this is without, calling it something that it's not. It's a very tricky challenge, I think.
Absolutely. And I am at the beginning of that journey. I'm in week 2 of a new PhD and there's a world in front of me. But the downplaying and the I can hear it in myself depending on who I talk to about this practice, the way that I do end up framing it. And it is interesting. And I think, look, it really, there's an element here, there's a gendered element as well as a woman in this world. And I think it's important to call that out as well, because I guess, and I know that this is a particular expertise of yours, but in terms of the musical leadership that I'm sort of shaping and exploring, I don't have a lot of conductors, for instance, or music educators that I can look to, that I can sort of see that type of, it is a feminine leadership. There is a sense of ethics of care, and I'm so interested in exploring more in sort of what I can share with the choral world. To take one small example recently, and this of course is in that more traditional context, but I was conducting a Mozart Requiem concert recently, and I actually found myself in tears in one of the movements, and I was on the podium conducting a full orchestra with choir and soloists. And I had a moment where I thought, oh my goodness, this is completely unprofessional, completely not your role. You're taking away from, get it together. And I, of course, had this, then reflection afterwards, and a lot of it based on choristers and soloists and musicians coming to me and saying, I haven't worked with a conductor that has that level of emotional attunement with the music and with the other musicians there. Now, I'm sure lots of people are displaying that type of thing, but I was just thinking about conducting. I have seen throughout my life and career as this masculine sort of trait of certainty, control, leadership, decision-making. What is it like to explore more of these ideas of being communal, being open, being fluid, being emotional, those sort of traits that we don't see in that role as much? Are they a sign of weakness and failure? Or do they create something that is unexpected, that is emerging between us, that is bigger than anything I could actually plan as a conductor? That's something I've been thinking about a lot recently.
Wow, that is such an interesting story that you've just conveyed there, and particularly poignant, I think, that your first reaction on the podium was pull yourself together. You have that script going through your mind rather than perhaps this is a new way of being a conductor. Perhaps some people might actually really appreciate this. Perhaps this might actually help the musicians to find something else in the music to do you know what I mean? Like we're conditioned to kind of have such a narrow view of particular roles. And I totally agree that those kind of stereotypes are informed by gender stereotypes. But yeah, I'm just really interested in leadership being, like you say, much more of a positive, perhaps feminine relational experience for people rather than power over or dictatorial or driven by the charisma of the leader or any of that stuff. Like that stuff's boring. and let's be honest, it's been tried and it doesn't work.
It's not working.
Obviously, it doesn't work. Yeah. You just have to open up your phone to know that it's not working, that style of leadership.
That's right.
Yeah. Talk to me about your PhD and this idea of singing as collective care, because I love that phrase.
Well, look, this PhD is an opportunity for me to just immerse myself in everything that we've been talking about. I've been running these sessions now for a few years. I've been bringing in these sort of what I need to find a better way to capture it or package it, but these sort of moments of free form vocal expression that I bring to various conferences and events and choirs. I would love to formalize it and grow it. I think that there's something here to share with other communities, and this is with other choirs and musicians, but also I have noticed throughout my career that arts health need to talk to each other more. I know that health practitioners really would love to know how to use artistic practices more, and I know that a lot of art makers would like to feel invited into or worthy to do work that has therapeutic outcomes, but they're really worried about making mistakes and causing harm. So I am hoping to create practice and create research that actually is an invitation to create more dialogue between those different realms that we're all trying to do the same thing. And I think that I, particularly coming as a social worker that's worked in mental health, I noticed so much risk aversion. So I'm really, really excited to sort of explore, sort of all these tenets of creating safe spaces. And I use safe spaces in quotation marks because nobody can tell somebody else what space is safe. That is only something an individual can decide for themselves. That is why I use that notion of self-determined safety only. I can never promise someone a space is safe. But I think that's something that can be really shared because there's this idea of, we all bring our own agency and empowerment to any musical space that we're in. And that's really important. And I think that a lot of people are using their agency to say, no, I will not sing. I will not put myself in that position. I can't sing. I am creating compositional works that give people an opportunity to go, all right, I said I wasn't going to sing, but maybe I will just have a little hum. All right, that sounds quite beautiful. I'll have a go singing that phrase. And sort of just to entering in and to letting go and to seeing what happens. And by the same token, I think that we can continue to breathe life into trauma-informed practice, into lived experience, mental health work. I think it's a really important time in the world when we are learning more about neurodivergence and trauma. Music has a lot to give. I'm really excited that I sort of have these two hats that all my life I've thought should be siloed and chosen between. This PhD is my opportunity to really connect them and see what emerges. And I'm fully aware and excited that it could all fall apart. And you might talk to me in a year and it could look really different. And that's the journey that I'm willing to be on as well.
Yeah, it certainly is a journey, but I think you're hitting on some really important aspects of the work that need to be investigated, kind of bringing the worlds together of arts and health and the artistic world, and having your background as a social worker where you've inhabited that world and you can also inhabit the musical world perfectly places you to be the person to investigate this. And it's getting back to what you were saying right at the beginning, that kind of space in between, isn't it? That's where all the really interesting stuff happens.
That's right. And look, I'm 1 week in and I've had more people than I can count sort of when I've told them I'm starting a PhD react in a way that I can only say must be a projection of other people's terrible experiences with PhDs of isolation and relationships falling apart. And but I think something that's important for me that I spoke about with you earlier is that I'm not in this sort of to tick a box or for the next part in my career. I'm doing this because I can't not sing. And I believe that might be the same for everybody. And I want to find out what are the ways to unlock that and share that.
Sounds brilliant. And I can't wait to hear more about what you find out on that journey. Joanna, as we wrap up, I want to ask you now, admittedly, you're not that old. Not as old as I am. So it might be a bit, early in your life journey to kind of get too philosophical. But what do you know about yourself today that you would tell your much younger self?
It's funny that you mentioned my age because I think the thing that comes to mind is very age and time based, but I think it's that it's never too late. And that's something that is really important with music. I think I was always really aware of my age and people's age and, I can't start to learn the piano at 12. There's other people who've done their Elmas at the con, or, I can't start trying to sing. I'm 34. A beautiful age, by the way. It's never too late. I think that, just a reminder to dive in and to have a go and to know that in 20 years' time, my older self would say, you're so young and you've got so much time. And that's what I would love to say to an 18-year-old young, impressionable singer who, has a heart for social justice and wants to do it all. Well, do it all.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Okay. What song makes you feel truly alive, Joanna Brooke?
I would say O Magnum Mysterium by Morten Lauridsen. It was a work that my dad actually showed me a few years ago. It's a beautiful choral work. Morten Lauridsen just makes exquisite, gorgeous choral works. I can't say anything that would do anything better than just have a listen. Yes, go and listen. And I performed some of his work when I was doing my my placement in Stockholm, and I was singing with the Stockholm's University Choir in this beautiful circular hall called the Erik Erikssonshallen that's over the archipelago of Stockholm, and the sun was going down and there were candles lit, And it's just this experience of absolute just peacefulness and stillness, of being immersed in something bigger than you. This piece makes me feel tiny, and I love that feeling. I love that feeling of being a small, tiny speck connected to this huge, creative, expansive world. That's a song that, yeah, absolutely takes me to that place.
What a beautiful image to finish our conversation. Joanna Brooke, thank you for making music that matters and for being my guest today on Leading Notes.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make sure to leave a review. I acknowledge that this podcast is produced on the lands of the Gayabal and Jarawar peoples of the Toowoomba region, and I pay my respect to all elders. Mark Schultes produced the original music for this podcast. Thanks for listening. Now go make music that matters.